everyone. For those of you who've been following my blog, Interview Right Consulting, you know that I have a section titled For Your Inspiration Only. And one of the inspirational quote that I've put out there was, there's an art to being interviewed. The art is you need the ability to talk about really complex thoughts succinctly, offering just the right amount of information and to keep the interview going. A lot of it is about mastering the art of asking questions as well. Now, having a strong resume only gets you through the initial door. There's a really crucial step, which is the ability to communicate it. Of course, that only applies to most jobs. If you are an engineer, oftentimes you need to do some coding exercises together. But I would say 85 to 90% of the jobs really require you to have great communication skills. Especially now with the rise of having resume coaches and resume writers, it's even more important that you have the ability to walk someone through your career journey and the ability to talk about the hows. How did you achieve a certain goals within in a certain job? At the same time, you only have 30 minutes to talk about yourself, your experience and accomplishments, and maybe you have 10 plus years of experience. So how do you put that all together in a 30-minute mini presentation, right? So that's why there has to be a lot of planning, a lot of thoughts that goes into planning an interview. So in this video, I'm going to share with you some tips on how you can structure and how you can gain as much control over a phone and even in-person interview as possible. I personally have done thousands of interviews in the last decade, and I too have been interviewed in a fair number of times. I've gone through interviews myself, and I would say an interview usually breaks down into the following format. Number one, tell me about you. 2, tell me what you did at company X, Y, and Z. And 3, how did you do it? Number 4, do you have any questions for me? And of course, there's some follow-up questions here and there, but these are the 4 main questions either a recruiter or the hiring manager is going to ask you. So I'm going to break it down for you how to tackle each one of them. First is tell me about you. What candidates usually do is, especially if they're feeling a little nervous, I noticed, is, well, how do you want me to start? Do you want me to talk about what I'm doing now, or you want me to go back to 10 years ago? You're giving control to another person. So what recruiters and hiring managers are looking for in this section is, how do you respond when you're put on the spot? And if given this kind of control, how do you respond? Now, this is sort of a side note. Your interview happens when you're communicating with the recruiter or the hiring manager, even electronically. So don't think that just because you're talking on the phone with the recruiter, that's when the interview starts. No, it happened way before that. So that's sort of a side note. Now, this question, we like to ask very open-ended questions just to see what we can get out of it. So this is my recommendation. Assuming your interview is only about 30 minutes, prepare about 3 to 5 minutes to talk about yourself. Don't ask questions like, oh, how would you like me to start? No, you take control over it. You prepare ahead of time a 3 to 5 minutes, sort of like this long elevator pitch of yourself. Instead of walking through the recruiter through your entire career journey, focus on maybe the first page or maybe the first page and a half of your resume, or maybe the last 3 jobs. If you've hopped around quite a bit, be prepared that the recruiter is going to ask you a follow-up question. Why did you hop around so often? Be prepared. So focus on the first 3 jobs. What have you done? Why did you leave? What are you looking for? And about your accomplishments. Now, for example, you can open with, while I have over a decade of experience in X, Y, and Z industry, just so that we have enough time to cover everything, I'll focus on my last 2 to 3 roles. And if you have any follow-up questions, please let me know afterwards. So that's my recommendation, what I recommend you to say to the recruiter or the hiring manager. Now, number 2, tell me what you did at company such and such. On average, a recruiter will have about 250 resumes for each of the job openings. And of that, they will screen out a lot of them, and reach out to about 10 to 15 of the candidates and have a phone interview. And of that, usually 3 to 5 of them will get to the hiring manager stage. So it's a pretty competitive process. What I'm trying to say is, because we talk with so many people, we know when someone stands out. Now, that's not the only job we talk with people, right? There are times we backfill the positions, and there are times we have similar positions open in different departments. So, we talk with people day in and day out. We collect all of their stories. So we know when someone is like, standard, there's a standard answer. And we know when someone is like, oh my God, this is the one. At least I do. So you want to be in that category of someone who really stands out. Equally important is we know when someone is not right. Like there's something that doesn't make sense. For example, I remember distinctly speaking with this candidate. He listed a lot of metrics on his resume. He talks about he would make 100 phone calls every day, and he would talk about it's the pipeline he's able to generate and the revenue he's able to bring in, and how many follow-up meetings he was able to set up. And the numbers were so outrageous that I'm like, it is not possible. But I did reach out to him and have a conversation, and I asked specifically that these are really outrageous metrics. Tell me how did you do it? And of course, there's a lot of fishiness that went on in the way he explained it. So what I'm trying to say is, because usually recruiters, we have standard set of questions we ask. We know when something is not right, when something is really great, and when something is like, everyone say that. So as you prepare, write down your what you did with each of those companies, practice it with your friends, get some feedback. And 3, how did you do it? So now that you've talked about, so this is more like a follow-up question to the previous one. Now that you've talked about your accomplishments, the how is really, really important, again, because we've surveyed so many people. We really know what stands out, what is probably a lie, and what is just mediocre, standard. So this is the part I really recommend you to do, to give it a lot of thoughts. Write it out for your top 3, if not even 5 jobs. How you achieve specific things. Sometimes you don't know why a recruiter reaches out to you. Maybe it's not about the first 3 jobs, maybe it's the 4th job you had. So just so that you're prepared, write down the accomplishments you've had in your first 5 jobs and really write down the how. Now, be cognizant of the time. There are, of course, 3 different categories of candidates that I've encountered. Some are so incredibly verbose that we completely run out of time. You mean like the information is so detailed, like you're probably giving away some proprietary information. So again, have as much control of your interview as you can by writing down the accomplishments and some bullet points of the how. How did you get to that point? Who did you have to collaborate with? How did you achieve that metrics? The thought process. Now, which brings me to the other bucket of people who are overly succinct, people who are just overly general. What usually happens is sometimes it can be you think there won't be enough time, so you just brush through how you go about doing it. I talked with so-and-so and I pulled together so-and-so, and then ta-da, these metrics happen. You don't want to oversimplify what you've done. So practice it, write it down. Again, kind of like writing an essay, a company such and such 2 to 3 accomplishments and 3 bullet points as to how you go about doing it, and then pick and choose which accomplishment is most important based on what you know about the role. And then do a dry run with your former colleagues. Let the person know that you're interviewing with company such and such, and practice with them. Oftentimes, if you have really good friends, then they will let you know, oh, I think you've oversimplified certain things. Again, what usually happens is, I personally have heard a lot of stories where oftentimes people really generalize their accomplishments and their hows. If a hiring manager or a recruiter asks you several times, I'm talking about at most maybe 2 times, can be 3 times, to elaborate on certain aspect of how you get to that point, you might run the risk of losing that person already. This is what that's actually us being generous with our time and asking you to talk about it. There's something there. Tell us a little bit more. We really want more information. It is not because we want to get some proprietary information from you or steal your idea. It really isn't that. It is because we sincerely want to know how you make that happen. Again, it goes back to, there's just so many incredible resume coaches and resume writers that you can have an incredible resume, but we want to know if you're the person who actually did the job, or if you have a really great subordinates, or you have a really great team that absorb most of the accomplishments. We just want to know who you are and what you've done. So I highly recommend you to give it a lot of thoughts, plan it out, do a dry run with people whom you know. Now, number 4, do you have any questions for me? Don't take this lightly. Some recruiters, like me, would jot down even the questions as a way of documenting the way you think, why you're qualified for the job, or why you're not qualified for the job, because sometimes the questions. Q&A shows the hiring manager and the recruiter what concerns you, what matters to you, the amount of homework you've done about the company. I kid you not, it happens very often during the Q&A phase. Many candidates would ask me, oh, what's the size of the company? Now, I'm not talking about agency recruiters. I'm talking about in-house recruiters, asking in-house recruiters, oh, what's the size of the company? Or when was the company founded? Or what location? Where is the office? All of those could be found when you look on LinkedIn, when you can Google it. So what it tells me is you have not done much homework about a company at all. So Q&A is really important. It does tell us what concerns you, what kind of homework you've done about the company. I've also had candidates though who come up with 10 to 20 questions for the recruiter, which is too many. I don't know if there's a secret number of questions you should ask a recruiter or the hiring manager, but I would say if you have more than 5, it is too many. Now, you should prepare 10 to 20 questions, but imagine if you're on the other end being asked, back-to-back 10 to 20 questions. It feels like an interrogation. Especially this portion being the very end of the interview, you don't want to leave a sour taste in the recruiter's mouth or the hiring manager's mouth. You want to sustain and really keep up that positive feeling. So of the 10 to 20 questions you have, just see if the recruiter or the hiring manager have already answered it during the phone interview. If so, talk about that. But if not, figure out 5 questions that is really suitable for the person. If the hiring manager or the recruiter say, oh, this is not a suitable question for me, then you begin to calibrate, what kind of question should I be asking this person? So I've digressed. No more than 5 questions, no interrogation. I'm going to do another video on the types of questions, or specifically what questions you should ask a recruiter as well as a hiring manager. Those are very different from each other. But as a starter, for the purpose of this video, these are the ones I would recommend. Question number 1, attributes that make someone successful on team such and such. What kind of attributes? Number 2, are you able to tell me how success is measured in this role? considering if the person has not covered it, make sure that you ask, how is success being defined in this role? Number 3, where are you at with the search? And number 4, based on our conversation, now only if you have time, based on our conversation so far, would you mind commenting on areas you think I'm a fit and areas that is concerning to you? I'm going to talk with you why I would suggest these questions. So the first 2 about attributes and about success, because you want to show the recruiter that being successful is important to you. You don't have to say that, but that's what it implies. So definitely ask that. And the last 2 is what's considered the quote-unquote closing questions. Those are questions that indicate you're interested in the role. And also, so say number 3, where are you at with the search? It tells you if someone say, we're in the late stage of the search, then you can think about how you're going to prioritize this opportunity and come up with some follow-up questions. Now, number 4, based on our conversation so far, can you comment? Can you comment on it? And one thing I really recommend you to not do is to not have a rebuttal with the recruiter or the hiring manager. In the event the recruiter says, I think you're a perfect fit, I really want to schedule an interview between you and the hiring manager now, great. But if the person say, I really like X, Y, and Z areas about your experience and I really enjoy my conversation with you, but these are my concerns. And recruiters, sometimes they do that. And the reason they don't do it is because we're really afraid that you are going to fight them. And it happens to me all the time. In my mind, I'm like, look, you asked me a question. I'm answering your question, so don't fight me. So my recommendation to you is write down in detail some of the concerns and some areas that you did really, really well. It's for you to gather some information for your next interview. But if there's any areas of concerns, jot it down and compose a follow-up email to address those things. And you can say that to the recruiters, like, I understand you have some concerns. I really appreciate you being honest and being upfront with me. Would you mind if I send you a follow-up email explaining some of those and see what happens next? Again, you want to sustain that positive energy throughout the interview. So I hope you find these tips helpful. If you have additional feedback, comment, or equally important, if you have other topics you would like me to cover in my YouTube videos, please do comment below or write to me directly at helen@interviewrightconsulting.com. See you next week. Bye-bye.